righty, I'm going to start out by making an acknowledgement that in the spirit of reconciliation, we want to acknowledge that this gathering is taking place on traditional lands across the province of Alberta, home to many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We acknowledge that this land is a traditional meeting ground, giving voice to its original peoples and the story of creation of this country in a way that history has forgotten. So just really quickly to introduce myself, my name is Angela Deering. Obviously, I'm a consultant with the consortia, but I actually still work full-time in Wetaskiwin Regional Public Schools here in the province. I was brought onto the consortia science team to specifically help with computer science. I do ed tech at the division level in my school division, and a huge piece of my job for the last 10 years has been focusing on STEAM at the elementary level. And for a number of years, I actually would go out to every grade 6 class in our division with some robotics and other STEM equipment and come in for 3-day full immersive STEAM camps where the grade 6 students would learn a lot about coding and computational thinking and design thinking. They'd create some amazing projects, and then we would showcase and share it with the rest of the school. So through that, I have a lot of experience in working with young kids in STEAM equipment. Following STEAM camps, we have rolled equipment out to all of our elementary schools that I come out, introduce to the students and teachers, and do a lot. So I've been doing a lot of STEAM and coding education for the last 10 years. And that's what got me into helping out with this new curriculum rollout and creating some professional development for teachers in the areas of computer science. So throughout the session today, I'm going to share an actually a lot of resources that I created over the last year regarding the 4 to 6 computer science. There's the links are all active in the presentation, so they will take you out to either some more PDF downloads, may lead you to the APRDC site, which I will be featuring as well. So lots to share. I'm hoping I get through all my slides. I do tend to over plan, but you have access and everything should be there. My emails, both my ARPDC one and my work ones are there for you. Please feel free to reach out if you have specific questions on any of this, or you're wondering about some of the resources I shared after the fact as well. So referencing the ARPDC site, everything that we have been working on and has been created by not only the science committees, but the math and ELA committees that have been working on the resources for the new curriculum as well. Everything is being posted on the ARPDC site. If you have not been there, I highly recommend checking it out. Maybe not right now, but there are a ton of resources there. Specifically, if you look under the curriculum resources tab, that's where you're going to find all of the resources that have been created for the new curriculum. There are some big buttons to quickly jump by subject, but once you get in, you can do some really granular searching to find things specific to your grade or whatever subject areas you're learning for. Since you're here, you likely know that that is where learning opportunities are also posted, but maybe you got an email that caused you to sign up for this. So just in case you're ever wondering, on the ARPDC site, also under Learning Opportunities is where you will find any upcoming sessions that the consortia are doing throughout the province. And the website remains arpdc.ab.ca, but the consortia is freshly undergoing a change. So you can see the new logo up here in the upper right, the consortium, Alberta Professional Learning Consortium. So we will from this point forward be known as APLC, and as you know, a full provincial consortia, but that website still does live at arpdc.ab.ca. So that's where you can find all of those resources. Also there or directly on YouTube, you will find a lot of video recordings and things that have been done. So I know I have a ton of on-demand videos posted on the ARPDC YouTube channel. Highly recommend finding that and following it or subscribing to it also, because there's lots of great resources for you there too. So, our main goal for today, I hope, is to make you feel comfortable and confident to teach computer science to your students this year. As I just mentioned, I've been doing a lot of computer science instruction with teachers and students for the last 10 years. So, I was really excited when I heard that the government was finally going to include computer science concepts into the curriculum because I was that person working at your division level who's saying, hey, I know you've got a lot of stuff to do, but I want you to teach this stuff also. It doesn't really fit in your curriculum, but it's really, really important things that we think kids should be learning about. So I was, as I said, really excited to see the curriculum come out. The structure is interesting to me. And so that's one of the things we'll look at today is just sort of the way that that curriculum is laid out and what it means for you to be taking this on when your students maybe haven't had the prior learning that comes along with that. So wherever you are in your journey, if you've done some coding or STEAM with your class along the way, or this is brand new, fresh to you this year because it's a part of your science curriculum, I think you should leave with some extra confidence and comfort with tackling this year with your students. We will start by doing sort of a general overview of that computer science topic. You're likely familiar with the structure of the new science curriculum and how in the past we had separate units that live sort of as individual silos, and now we have those topics. I still tend to use old curriculum language, and I see those outcomes as topics, but we have the same topics now building from year to year, which I see as a really lovely thing. Students are going to start learning about computer science in kindergarten, and it carries on and builds a natural progression up through grade 6. So we'll start by talking a bit about what they do learn in Division 1. Happily, you'll find that it's not, I don't think, something hard to cover or even. I would say the students already have a lot of the knowledge and skills that exist in the Division 1 curriculum, even if they weren't explicitly taught it as computer science, because as you'll see, it's mostly just about following instructions and then creating instructions. So by just making some connections to previous experiences your students had in lower grades, you should quickly be able to bridge the gaps that are missing and then, jump in at the level that you need to reach for your students this year. Then we'll have a very quick look at each of the grade 4, 5, and 6 curriculums. Just jump quickly into the cusps, the knowledge, the understandings, the skills, and the procedures that are there. We certainly don't have time in an hour and a half session to do a very big deep dive into these, but I'm gonna go over them quickly, and then at the end is where I will share some just practical resources and ways that you can implement this in your classroom. Those will be generic or general, meaning grade 4, grade 5, grade 6 doesn't matter. You should be able to find that they can be of use in your class. So that is our goals and the agenda for this morning. And as I say, I hope you leave with not only a comfort, but maybe even a bit of excitement to start doing some CS with your students this year. So talking just to the specific structure of the curriculum, again, as I mentioned, you've likely already seen this for sure in other subjects. So just a quick overview, the science curriculum is laid out similar to the math and ELA curriculums. We have that organizing idea at the top that is for all of the grades that are taking any particular topic. Then we have a guiding question, and then that more specific learning outcome, which is still pretty general for each individual grade. So I think this is the grade 5 one that I'm showing here. These links up at the top will actually just pull a PDF of a one-pager of the curriculum for your grade. That's just something that I found useful in all of the work that I've been doing in the topics to just have that at a glance. and thought if I was in the classroom, I'd probably like to have that too. So that was, it's just copied and pasted from Learn Alberta. I'm not sure if they've made any recent changes to the computer science piece. So this would have been copied and pasted earlier last year. So it should be the same, but to be honest, I have not had a chance to check. You can, of course, always head over to Learn Alberta to the new curriculum there and print it out as well. So that organizing idea that goes all the way from kindergarten up through grade 6 for computer science, you may find doesn't sound very computery, but it does sound very sciencey. Problem solving and scientific inquiry are developed through the knowledgeable application of creativity, design, and computational thinking. So you can see I highlighted the first little bit there in orange where when we started to plan professional development for the science curriculum, one of the conversations that we had was, does computer science belong as a topic that we cover, in October and November every year? And then, we move on to our other topics. And a lot of us, especially us ed tech and STEAM people, felt that that may be going backwards for teachers who have been doing STEAM and some coding and computational thinking. And we don't want them to stop incorporating that throughout the year. So while there's definitely some concepts in computer science that we need to say, okay, boys and girls, this is computer science concept that we're learning about today, because that overarching piece is talking about problem solving and scientific inquiry, this actually applies into all of your other science topics, definitely math, and can even be stretched into your other subject areas as well. So it's just going to be making a connection back to, hey, this is a computer science thing. We're using these problem solving skills that we learned in science during our language arts project or during this other science topic. And then that scientific inquiry, which, okay, why is it telling me my meeting's going to end in 10 minutes? That's an interesting one, Chris.
Okay, we've had a few little gremlins that have come through some of our sessions yesterday, the same thing. So I'll ignore it for now. We'll
Okay, so I'm gonna say I really hope this doesn't shut down in 10 minutes. I just got a warning that something about contacting my IT to upgrade my Zoom. And this was all set up. So hopefully um, we don't only have 10 minutes left, but with that distraction aside, and then the scientific inquiry, I think Nicole's session was prior to mine this morning, where she was talking about scientific methods. So again, that's another piece where we're going to be working on problem solving and scientific inquiry in other areas. So there's great opportunities to connect in that computer science. And then creativity, design, and computational thinking, that's the meat of that computer science curriculum. And you'll see as we look a little bit closer at some of it, how we start in kindergarten and move the progression up. And we start talking, like I say, about instructions. And then we see the creativity piece start to come in. And then we really start to see design thinking and computational thinking as the focus is moving up into your division, at where students are expected to be sort of applying these. So again, any chances we have to connect that to other subjects or things that you're doing along the way are really going to help your students get a deeper understanding of the computer science skills that they're meant to learn, as well as problem solving isn't just a computer science skill for sure. So um, that's the big piece. We see this at the top, of course, then of every grade. So these are the outcomes for kindergarten, grade 1 and 2. And as you can see, kindergarten and grade 1 are really just learning about understanding, interpreting instructions in their learning environment. And one of the cusps, it even specifies as a skill that they need to be able to follow a two-step instruction. So when I did a lot of PD last year with the Division 1 teachers, I would always encourage teachers to see beyond this. Like, your kindergarten kids are following more than two-step instructions on the first day of school. You have lots of opportunities when we're talking about, what happens when the fire bell rings? Well, we do this and we do this and we do this. So there really are lots of opportunities for them to naturally work with instructions. So for you, when you lead this into the computational thinking piece and the block-based programming that's asked in grades 5 and 6, you don't have to go back and do a lot of pre-teaching. There doesn't need to be a big lesson. This is just making some connections for the students, and that, computers and robots and machines, they follow instructions just like we do when we follow a recipe, when we follow an instruction that we have in class. You all know that when I put my arm up, that means you're supposed to take your seats and be quiet, or whatever other algorithms we've programmed our students with. So you have chance to make those connections and get rid of, or not get rid of, but cover what your students, as I said, have already inherently know. It's just making a connection to, hey, did you know that that's the same thing that you would do if you were trying to make a computer game or an app? In grade 2, we see creativity start to pop up here. I'll talk a little bit more specifically about creativity, and I've got at least one resource to share with some activities on that too. But we're really in the science curriculum, and in computer science specifically, we're talking about creativity in the ways that inventors and engineers are creative. How can you find, a new way to do something? Oh, that type of idea. So that starts to come in grade 2. And in grade 2, the students are starting to design instruction. So in kindergarten and grade 1, they really just need to understand that sometimes, we follow sets of instructions. Whoops, I just hit a key. Sometimes we follow sets of instructions. Computers and machines do the same kinds of things. Now in grade 2, we may say, can you write out or explain to me the steps for how you add two numbers together? And we're actually meeting this computer science outcome while also talking about math at the same time. And then maybe the creativity piece is there another way you could think of to do this? Now we're talking about creativity and being problem solvers, really. So I think there's lots of opportunities, again, to just touch on that creativity just through daily interactions with your students. They get something wrong on an assignment, we can have those conversations. But okay, well, hey, how about let's put our engineering cap or our design thinking cap on. How can we solve this problem differently? And then also in grade 2, which I'll touch on, is where they talk about debugging. So there's the first real computery, sciencey coding kind of piece comes up in grade 2, where we're going to write instructions. Then we also need to know how to figure out where our instructions went wrong. So that's a piece in grade 2. And then in grade 3 is where we have a repeat of creativity, but now we're connecting it to computational thinking. In my opinion, the grade 3 curriculum could outline computational thinking maybe a little bit more explicitly, because once we hit grade 4, there's already an assumption that students know what computational thinking is and they know the process and they can do it. It's a big thing. I don't know if grade 3 students are all going to be developmentally ready to completely understand computational thinking at a deep level. So that's one that for sure I think you would be revisiting early on in your computer science topic, just to make sure we know what computational thinking means and we understand how it applies not only to science but to other things that we're trying to do in school as well. So that's the 3 outcomes for K to 3. Watching my time and I'm talking too much. And then here we are with your 4 to 6, which I'm certainly not going to talk long on this slide because I do have more specific information. But we see now, as I said, you don't see computational thinking as a part of the outcome now at 4, 5, 6. We assume students know that already because they learned it in grade 3. However, as I say, it's a big concept that requires a lot of practicing and connecting into different areas for us to have a really good understanding of it. So here we're talking about design. So now we are moving into teaching students about the design thinking model and what that uh, whole big piece is, which again, that's a big thing to get your brain around. Also difficult for students to practice certain parts of that, which I will touch on as well. And then when we hit grade 6, we now believe students know computational thinking, they know design thinking, they've been applying it to projects and things that they've created in class. And now they're going to refine, they're going to use abstraction, which is the really big brain piece at the end, excuse me, of computational thinking, and they're going to create computational artifacts. So even in grade 5, we're talking about could be used by a human or a machine. So we could still be touching on this, just running out instructions, like I say, for a math, how you do a certain calculation in math, having your students write those steps out would be creating a set of instructions that could be followed by a human or a machine. So it really doesn't get explicit with they should be coding, though you do see some block-based when we get into the skills and procedures for grade 5. I encourage kindergarten teachers to start talking about coding. So, the curriculum refers to sets of instructions. No reason not to introduce the word um, no need to not introduce the word algorithm right away in kindergarten. Understanding that an algorithm is a set of instructions, we're just giving them that little bit of extra knowledge, and then that's going to build up until we hit a grade where it says, I have to understand what an algorithm is. We can introduce the computer pieces that maybe are somewhat missing within the curriculum specifically, along with, and you're just going to give your students extra hand up with computer science. So there was a question in the chat regarding abstraction. Yes, I'm definitely going to touch on that more specifically in just a little bit when we look at the grade 6. Well, actually before that, because as soon as we start talking about computational thinking, that's going to come up. And then also, I talked about the resources that are uploaded to the ARPDC site and our YouTube channel. So I do have a 1 hour session on each grade 4, 5, 6, deep dives, closer looks at the curriculum with lots of examples. And then there's also some other resources that I've created. So while we won't get into it super deep today, there are other things out there that I have created for you that get into that as well. Oh, I jumped ahead before I wanted to. So I we just sort of glanced over the K to 3. And as I say, I think in a nutshell, students need to understand, as I said, it doesn't explicitly say algorithm until a little bit later on, but they just need to understand sets of instructions and what they are. And so, like I say, we can make connections to following recipes, procedures, and routines that we're doing in class, steps to something that we're learning or doing as an activity. Those all um, those all fit with sets of instructions and algorithms. And then that debugging, that's a really specific piece that comes out in grade 2. And we just talk about finding our mistakes. So again, you have opportunities to just use that language. Student comes to have their math question checked out. Oh, well, you don't have the right answer. Let's debug this and see if we can find out where you went wrong. And we're using the language and we're actually using the skill, and students are going to make that connection, and then they'll easily understand. Then if they're doing a computer program, doing some block-based coding, they will know, oh, it's not working. Oh, that means I need to debug. I need to go back and look through each piece and see where the mistake was made. And then they do that computational thinking as we saw in grade 3. So we're expecting students to understand that already. So we didn't see coding, specifically programming, through all of that curriculum outcome stuff. It comes in a little bit more specifically in some of the knowledge and skills and procedures, but I want to start with that because that is at the end what students are expected to do. By grade 6, they are expected to create a computer program of some sort using block-based coding. So I often think that, especially depending on, for those of us that this wasn't a thing at all when we were in school, I think we think computer coding is something really mystical and magical and complicated. But as we can see from the K to 3 curriculum, it's really actually much simpler than that. This is just a really brief computer science vocabulary. This is what I think students in grade 4 would need to understand, or adults, you as a teacher to do computer science would only need to know just these few pieces of coding language to be able to start coding yourself, to understand what coding is, and to meet those grade 6 top level curriculum objectives. So, as I say, we may think previously that coding is really complicated and it's complicated maths and I'm seeing all these zeros and ones. But it's really, as I've been saying many throughout this presentation already, is just sets of instructions. So, we can ask students to come up with a set of instructions for all kinds of things that they come into school already knowing how to do, like maybe brushing our teeth. This is a visual set of instructions. In grade 1, it talks a lot about how instructions can come in different ways. So we may talk about how, what are some different ways that you get some instructions that someone tells you to do something. Like, does your mom say get ready for bed? And there's certain steps that you do that take you in that order. That's exactly what we do. Do you think you could teach a robot human how to brush their teeth? What are the steps that you would put in and tell them that they have to do? And we have those conversations about how an algorithm or a set of instructions has to be really, really specific when we give it to a machine. We open the toothpaste and then put it on the brush. And this can be, like, as I say, applied to lots of things that students already know how to do. Um, Sets of instructions, that's really what computer coding is just putting the right things in order and telling that machine what you want it to do. I did do this activity with students starting in kindergarten, and I do it at adult workshops too. It works a lot better when you're in a room full of people, but I will talk to my students about how what I've just been saying, how algorithms are sets of instructions and we can program machines. And hey, you guys actually are programmed already. Did you know that? Your parents may have programmed you, or I've programmed you to do certain things. You know what to do when the fire bell rings. That's a program, an algorithm that you have memorized. That's what we do when we teach computer things. I'm going to teach you all a new algorithm today. And so then I'm just going to burn through this. I'm not gonna run it as an activity with you guys today, but just to share it, something you can take back to do with students, a fun way to introduce what computer coding is and algorithms, and even loops. So starting with showing students that, this is your computer commands. This is your language now. You're my little kid bots, and your computer language is this. When you see the letter R, you're going to stomp your right foot. And if you see a letter L, you'll stomp your left foot. And when you see an H, you're going to clap your hands. So then we talk about what an input is and how, when you lift your watch up, it does certain things. Or when you point the remote at the TV, it sends a signal. That's an input. So I actually have an old remote control that I pack around if I do this with students. So it's fun to use the remote on them. So tell them that when I point the remote at you guys, or when I hit the start button or whatever that input is, you're going to run an algorithm. Let's practice. So, we start out and I run the remote. Almost always kids will, they'll stomp and clap as soon as the slide comes up. And then we talk about, wait, a program can't run until something tells it to start. You run the program without something telling it to start. We need to have that input at the beginning of a program to make it run. Let's do some more practice. So we'll go through, and then I would introduce the concept of a loop and talk about how when we see things inside a loop, that means we're going to keep doing them. And a loop might tell us to do something a certain number of times. And I would start this and run this with them. And then sometimes we'll see a loop that actually says that it's a forever loop. And that just means you keep doing this forever. But we can't really do something forever. So there must be another input that must happen then to stop that forever loop. And so then we talk about the stop. If you've done any block-based coding or had your students do that, when something clicked, there's a when stop all. These are going to connect right into that block-based coding for students. And like I say, even little kindergartners can have fun with this. And then I like to culminate with this one that's way beyond the students usually. But as I said, it works well when you're in a room together and when we get us all stomping and clapping together on sync. I can play a little bit of music or start singing if I'm feeling inclined. This is also where doing this in person with students, when you get to the piece where they're doing the stomp, stomp, clap, um, of course, they're not all in sync right off the hop because everybody starts a little bit differently. But it doesn't take long, a little bit longer with students than with adults. When I did it with rooms full of teachers, very quickly the whole room was in sync with each other. And then that comes a time where we can talk about how, so we've talked a lot about how we follow instructions and computers do the same. Here's where our brains are different from computer brains. Your brains listened and took in what was going on around you, and your brain made a decision, even though you didn't think about it consciously, to get in sync with everybody else in the room. It just made sense for our human transient minds to get all in sync with each other with our stomp, stomp, clap. And when we tell a computer to do something, if we had 30 computers in the room all start something at just a fraction of a different time, they would not sync up with each other. They would all be running out of time. So while we can teach computers and robots and machines to do many, many things that humans can do, the unique thing that's always to us and the type of brain that we have is that we have thought. We can decide whether we're doing something or not. And with a machine, when we give it that input command, it has to complete that command no matter what. I've done another variation of this where I use movement arrows and have the students, move one step to the left and one step to the right. Same idea, we do the loop. That one actually taught them the box step. Again, something just a little bit fun at the end. They learned how to code. They also learned how to do a dance. And then with that one, we would have a conversation about, so how many of you ran into your desk or something? You went to run my code and there was something in your way. And it always happens. You're in the small space in the room. I just have them stand up at their desks. And then we can talk about, hey, so you naturally debugged, you figured out a solution. You either stopped or you adjusted where you were standing so that you could complete your program. And then that same talk about how that's how your brain is different from a computer or a machine. If there is an error, um, when your computer goes to run a certain process, it's just going to sit there and spin. And you didn't just stand there going, what do I do now? Your brain quickly understood that you needed to move to the side of your chair so that you could make that forward step. So just a couple fun activities that, like I say, they're introducing those lower level, what is that set of instructions? And we're making the connection into the computers, algorithms, and actually creating a computational artifact with code, as they will eventually be asked to do. And then make sure you have that stop button handy, because all that stomping and clapping, especially with a group of rowdy grade sixes, can get quite noisy. And we want to make sure that we can stop our forever loop, so that other input there. So keeping with a little bit more general, and I'm really watching my time. So anywhere, I hope I remembered to put them all in, but if I have active links in the slides, because they are generally colored to the slide presentation, I did try to include this little link icon just to let you know that something was indeed a link and not just an underlined piece of text. So this links to something that actually Ted shared yesterday that I hadn't seen. It's a slides presentation from the Nouns project that ARPDC has permissions to use. As I see those logos that are there, and it looked like a really great way to introduce students to coming up with original ideas, and that piece around how we may connect being creative to being artistic. A lot of creativity conversations, especially for kids, would come around connections to art and music maybe. But when we talk about creativity and science, we're talking about problem solving and finding solutions to problems, or maybe finding new, more efficient ways to do things that we used to do in a less efficient way. So this slides presentation that Ted linked in here that I shared also has some really good introductory activity. I thought it was great with some side-by-side images of a really regular looking building and then a really architecturally amazing building. And so which one of these is original? And talking about how do you think the engineers, what made them come up with that idea? And having those conversations just around being creative thinkers. When we come to a wall, we don't stop. We think about how can we get over or around the wall.
And
Now the
if you can go to full screen, um,
oh, of course I can. Thank you.
thank you.
Just give me 1 sec. It's probably going to jump back on me here for a second just because of my, that'll look much better. So thank you, Chris, for interrupting with that. Design thinking and computational thinking, they're big. And again, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to get too deep into them today. I'm going to just try and get through quickly to give you something to start with. The slides that I'm about to share definitely, again, can be used directly with students. I've used them with students myself in the past. And again, on the ARPDC site under the new curriculum resources are my more specific presentations made for each grade and some other resources. So in those, you'll find specific to your grade as well with these concepts. Big things. And with that creativity piece, it's always we're connecting it into one of these other processes. How do we use creativity in design thinking? How do we use creativity when we're working through computational thinking? And what is computational thinking? There's a lot of different theories out there about it. I like this one. It's succinct with four different pieces. Again, if you Google up what is computational thinking, you may find different variations on this, but this tends to be sort of the most common way to look at it and a really good way to look at it with students. And then that abstraction piece that's popping up in here is, really explicitly stated in grade 6. Which I find interesting as well. So let's just talk a little bit about computational thinking. So this one I think came from the grade 4 slides specifically. I do have a different example at each of the grade levels, but they all come to down to the same thing. So I've chosen how to create some type of a food item when I'm breaking down computational thinking because it's a really good way, something everybody knows what a sandwich is. So I don't have to be worried about if kids understand that piece. We can really break down what computational thinking is by connecting it to something we're really comfortable and familiar with. And you can connect it into almost anything you're teaching them, certain pieces of it for sure. And lots of times the whole thing just by, again, referring back to this language and making connections to the process that they've learned in computer science as they're using it in other areas. So decomposition is as it sounds, it's just taking a problem or a thing or whatever we're looking at and breaking it down into all of its individual parts. To see a full picture, we need to see everything that's in the picture. So doing this activity with students, of course, I wouldn't have all of these things up. We'd be, so here's a sandwich. What goes in a sandwich? And we brainstorm and we're going to, list all this stuff out, find images, however I'm doing it. We're going to come up with everything that's in a sandwich. And we may have these conversations about, well, I don't like tomatoes. There shouldn't be tomatoes in my sandwich. Oh, okay. Well, so we're brainstorming for everybody. What's anything that could be in a sandwich? And then we can get, really wild. But I've got my little list here that we'll keep moving forward with. So once we decompose our problem, so again, if we're connecting this into specifically computer science, what is the goal of your app or what do you want your Scratch project to do? Which I am going to talk about Scratch quite a bit. I'm a big fan favorite and I have a bunch of Scratch resources to share as well. What do you want the project to do? What's the end goal? What do you want the cat to do? And I want him to do this. Okay, well, let's break that down. What does he need to do to get there? We're going to break down and find all of those individual steps. How do you brush your teeth? I put it in my mouth. Whoa, can you do that without opening the toothpaste? So whatever we're breaking it down, what are all the little pieces involved? That's the first step of computational thinking. Then the second step gets into pattern recognition. So we might be recognizing patterns between the elements, which is in my example here. We could be recognizing patterns between different, completely different areas as well. Like, what are some other foods that you might make with these same ingredients, or any time or any way that we can find similarities and differences between attributes or items or steps or whatever it is that we're working with. Then we're looking at that pattern recognition. It's really making connections and seeing if we can't group some things up, because we're moving towards that abstraction piece. So with our sandwich ingredients that we landed on finally, then we determined that we could do some grouping and sorting here. If you're working through any of your other science topics and you have opportunities for students to be sorting things out into 1, 2, 3, 4 categories, they are working computational thinking. As we're deciding if something belongs in a certain category, we're recognizing, oh, all of these things are red, or all of these things breathe oxygen. They go into this, they have a pattern that makes them all go together. So again, this is a simple one. Some of our things we're going to slice. Some of the things need to be washed, and some things we need to slice and wash. And then let's move into abstraction. So in this case of abstraction, I actually don't think my example is good as I'm looking at it here now. So we're looking at abstraction, and so I've eliminated what doesn't matter, and I know certain things now about this that I could take out and apply generically to anything. So what are other things that you slice and wash? What are other things that you just slice but you don't wash? And then we may find even things that aren't food come into this specific sandwich conversation, and we can talk about how, well, would we use that in a food thing? So then that kind of belongs in its own category, even though it carries these attributes. But abstraction in the simplest forms, and specifically as it applies to coding, is getting things down to specifically just the parts we need. So if we were going to move into making an algorithm, so remember, we're still talking about making a sandwich. This is our computational thinking through the process of how will we come up with an algorithm for making a sandwich that anybody could understand. And oh, I have another slide on abstraction here where, like, what are some other things that may use similar ingredients and follow similar steps? And I wonder, do you think there's a way that we could actually write an algorithm that would apply to a sandwich and also a taco in any way? And we can have those conversations. Well, yeah, you could very generally, if it needs to be if it needs to be washed, wash it. If it needs to be sliced, slice it. Does it matter what ingredient it is, or is it just the part where it needs to be washed that matters? That's abstraction. We're throwing away that it's a banana. It doesn't matter. It's an ingredient that needs to be opened and then sliced. So throwing away all of the extra details and focusing in on the specific basic things that we need to happen. So then when we get, and this is going to probably be a little small on your screens, but when we get into that algorithm design, this is my end algorithm. We're probably going to start with a lot of really specific steps. So then we can start having conversations about, well, can we condense this? Do we need, we're saying that you're going to open this and open this and open this. Could we condense that together? Remember how we learned about the loop when we did our other activity? Could we make a loop that would help make this algorithm for a sandwich simpler and shorter? And again, so we're building the algorithm, but we're also still abstracting and getting things down. And we're touching on computer science and coding concepts without really necessarily talking about coding specifically. This is exactly what we do when we do computer programming. We figure out all the steps, then we see if we can figure out ways to make it more efficient and use some of those coding elements to create that efficiency and really abstract out what is the most important. So that's my computational thinking in a really quick nutshell. As I say, the longer presentations and videos for your grade will go through that very similarly, but also in a little bit more detail. Design thinking, I'm going to take even less time going over with you specifically. For starters, because I think you are likely more familiar with design thinking already than you are with computational thinking. It has been around for a very long time. Again, there may be variations of models where you'll see slightly different steps, maybe one more step, one less step. This is just the most common that I've come across and that I've used with students and found work well. I If you can start doing design thinking with your students early on in the year, and if you can come back to it as frequently as possible, as in as many different areas as you can possibly apply it to, that's going to do your students the best. Design thinking process is actually really hard for students to get their minds around, and it takes practicing, and it takes practicing the certain elements of it explicitly and specifically for them to be able to then take it and apply it to a project that you've given them, where we're just giving them the end result we want them to achieve, and we expect them in grade 5 already to work through this design process on their own and meet that end objective. I did a lot of design challenges when I did the grade 6 STEAM camps. In fact, that's how we always started STEAM camp. And I learned a lot of things about young people and the design process. At the beginning, when you work on empathizing, it's not something that kids naturally necessarily understand the concept, even less that they may understand how to do it. I have activity that I do with students where I show them a video of a hearing impaired girl singing on one of the talent shows, and we talk about creating some technology for her because she has to sing in her socks. And we watched the video. It's a very emotional video, and I cover that in my other sessions I did. And then when I'm an easy to tear up person. Every time I watch that video, I get a little emotional. But then that's when I would stand in front of the students and say, that is empathy. How many of you felt excited when Simon hit the golden buzzer? And I mean, it's, and of course, the dramatic music, and we could have conversations about how they create all those feelings in us too. But that's how I describe empathy to the students. Watch a really emotional video, and then that right there, what you felt, that's empathy. When we're going to invent or design something for someone else, we need to put ourselves in their shoes. We need to understand how they feel. How can we do that? And of course, all of any student projects or lessons that you look up around design thinking will focus on having them doing interviewing in the beginning, right? So learning how to ask someone questions and get that feeling of empathy to get ourselves in their shoes. That's something that we can work on with the students, outside of science and even outside of maybe doing the rest of the design process. They need lots of practice with that. They do great with the brainstorming and the figuring out what they need to do. In fact, brainstorming is a great time. We love to do, like, there's no bad ideas, and we're having a great time. And they're still really enjoying themselves as they start to build their exciting projects they plan. And then we hit this part where we might have failure, especially if we're working with computer coding. Coding is putting instructions in order, but sometimes it can be complicated. Sometimes we need to really think about what order, how those instructions need to be put. And as young people, we often have an experienced failure. So when things don't work the first time, we may expect the grown-ups in our lives to just give us the answer or tell us how to do this. I did When I did SEAM camps. Um, every time I had students who hit these emotions, frustration, anger, it's not working. Why won't you just tell me how to do this? And I would always come at them with like, I'm old. I don't know how to do programming. Like, you guys have to figure it out. And as I say, that um, frustration, this one was often I would say it was the Ange in the class, because I'm sure I wouldn't have done well with the failure as a grade 6 in overachieving um, student either. So this piece too, how to go back to something and fix it, make it better, make it more efficient, make sure it works. That's hard for students. And Some students will jump in computer programming and the sort of linear fashion of it will be easy. They'll come naturally to it. And others are going to struggle more. And they need to learn that that's not only a computer science skill, that's a life skill, just, accepting a failure, looking for your mistakes, debugging, going back. So I think this model's not great because this end piece needs to go around and around because very rarely do successful engineers and inventors run with their prototype. Most often, there are a lot of iterations of something before we reach our final. And as we could look at modern technology, companies like Apple and Google, they don't see an end. They're always reiterating and making new. So that's one of those that's an example you can use with students too, just to encourage them to go back to things. And again, can be applied into your other subjects. You got something wrong in math? Well, hey, let's go back to some of our design process here. Go back to the drawing table, start the question over again, or maybe we're going back to our computational thinking. Let's do some debugging. That can be a piece of our design process here too. Learning to be satisfied with the crumpled up papers, to get that bright light bulb idea. We will experience a range of emotions in our students. Um, we need to teach them how to fail, and then they can be successful in everything the sooner that they can learn that. Oh gosh, I can't believe how quickly the time is gone, especially with our unplanned break. I am not in a panic to rush out at 12. I will not be offended if you are have other things to do and don't want to spend more of your summer holidays with me. I will attempt to get to the end of my slides. We'll see how it goes. So with the design thinking, I have just actually written out my tower challenge here. I'm not going to read this, but when again with the STEAM camps, one of the first challenges we did right after learning about Mandy and empathy, and we do that challenge. The next thing I did was a tower challenge with them where I would give them in groups a big Ziploc baggie full of a lot of stuff. Things like, paper clips, pipe cleaners, toothpicks, masking tape. Masking tape is important. So there's only two things you have to make sure is in these bags or provided to the students. Otherwise, whatever you've got in your art junk drawers, it works. There doesn't have to be the same things in every bag. In fact, that creates an even more exciting challenge because then you can have students being, well, how come they've got bamboo? We don't have bamboo skewers. So they need masking tape, and they need plain 8.5 by 11 paper. Through doing this with many years with students, I found it a little bit more effective. Students would get to the point on their own without me explicitly showing them. Better if I handed out the Ziploc baggies full of all the fun stuff that they love to see. I'd have little pom-poms and whatever in there. They would get really excited at their bags of stuff. And then the challenge, build a tower. I think it was 20 centimeters tall. Again, this is explicitly stated in some of the other resources that I've mentioned and will try to point out before the end of the presentation again today. So 20 centimeter tower, hold up a can of soup or some other suitable weight, and then give the students a really tight timeline. I give them like 15 minutes. You got to build this tower. And then as they would start building, this is when I would actually come around like, oh, I forgot you guys. I was supposed to give you paper too. And I would hand the paper out separately. And as I say, I learned this along the way that I thought these bright little people were going to figure it out, but they definitely allowed the stuff in the Ziploc bag to distract them. So after 15 minutes, and I've had kids successfully build a tower. Not very many built one with the stuff in the bag that successfully held up the amount of weight that we were asking it to support. Of course, the solution is to create a simple tube out of the plain paper, tape it together. In fact, you don't even need to use much masking tape. A small piece of masking tape will work, and it'll hold that mass on top, depending what you're using for mass. I did have index cards in my Ziploc bag, so some of the kids would, put the index card on top to make a platform on the tower. Every time the towers held that mass up, they were blown away, that they had wasted all this time trying to tape toothpicks together. And then it was a good opportunity to talk about, um, distractions. And sometimes the simplest solution is the best, and actually be a really great time to touch in on abstraction as well. So, what do you think about all the stuff in the Ziploc bag? It was there to distract you, right? It was not what you needed for your purpose. In fact, and you all disregarded the paper because it was like the most boring thing I gave you. Yet it was the solution to your problem. So that's a fun design challenge. Just one I found. Obviously, if you Google again design challenges, you're going to find so many things. The link on here I thought was a good collection of just 10. It's actually framed for homeschoolers, so it says 10 days of design thinking challenges you can do at home. But they were low equipment. In fact, one of them was a paper airplane challenge, which I thought, oh yeah, that would be a great way to do design thinking. So there's tons of resources out there for how you can get your students doing those design challenges. They do it in other ways, and they'll be able to apply that into computer programming when they get there. Oh, I finally hit um, getting into your specific curriculum. So here is the grade 4. I just took it out of the chart form that the curriculum is laid out in and put it in this. And this is kind of how my brain looks at it. So the knowledge, this is the stuff that you may or may not talk about all of these things with students. In a way, I see knowledge almost as your background understanding so that you can help the students meet the skills and procedures. These would be what connect most closely to what you're accustomed to as specific learner outcomes from our previous curriculums. This is where you see like, what are the students supposed to be able to do? We're seeing that under the skills and procedures. So this is for grade 4. There's just the 5 skills and procedures. One, understanding. So the understandings are different from grade to grade. We have that top level that's talking about problem solving and all of that. And then for grade 4s, they have one understanding. And as you can see, this is the design process one. So in grade 4, we already know computational thinking. Check that off. Now we're going to learn about the design process. So it's your grade 4s that are expected to be working through these things. But again, when you look at what the skills and procedures are, you can probably easily see many ways that you can just connect this into other things you're already planning on doing. And the other science topics provide lots of opportunities for you to have students creating artifacts, talking about the availability of material and design. In fact, that tower challenge that I just quickly chatted over with you, you could tick this skill and procedure off with that one as well. Testing artifacts. I think the biggest piece here will be explaining to grade 4 students what an artifact is, which really is, as it says up here, pretty much anything that people make. So we see the word algorithm just popping up in the knowledge here, but it's also being included with all kinds of other things that we can have students creating. So you can be building a model about animal life cycles and be working all of these computer science outcomes as well. Another piece of the resources that I've created are connections. So again, there's videos and the slides that went along with them for each of your science topics and their connections to computer science. So there's a computer science, earth science, connections grade 4 video, and an earth science, computer science grade 5 video and resources. So I highly recommend checking those out for ideas of ways to integrate these skills and procedures into your other science topics. And it's just really, you're going to be practicing and using these skills while also covering other things. And then we see this design process piece here with providing feedback and collaboration. And that's where any chances that we have to go through that reiteration process that we see at the end of the design process, and having students give feedback to each other. That's another thing that we need to work with students on. So there's some like really good models out there for, how do you give one positive and then, one area for improvement, and how do you give feedback and how do you take feedback and how do you feel when people give you feedback? what does that tell you about how you should give feedback? And we're working that end of the design process, and we're talking about empathy, and we can apply this throughout not only the other science topics, but I think definitely lots of the things that you're doing in math, because, algorithms and steps, that's all going to line up nicely with math concepts as well. And then collaboration. Almost always students are working in groups when they're creating and building and designing big projects and things. And so that's actually a piece of their curriculum here, is understanding that two heads are better than one. And sometimes someone else can help you solve a problem that you've really been struggling with. So I think you can find lots of great ways to cover this. Like I say, without, yes, poetry, that's a great idea too. Um, Oh, I could just see writing algorithms for how to make a synquane. That's a fabulous idea. Making those connections, we're inspiring people. I love it. Okay, I need to keep moving. We're getting out of time. So grade 5, I think you have the heaviest piece in the computer science. So there are two understandings for grade 5, so that I've separated them out. Generally, you will see them separated out on our other documentation and resources, because of course they're largely very different from each other, and likely are going to be covered separately, or at least addressed separately. So now in grade 4, we have learned the design process. All of a sudden in grade 5, you get to reveal the surprise. We can use design to create instructions for humans or machines. And so we still are seeing, we're talking about humans or machines. It's not telling you must be machines, though I'd highly encourage the use of some machines when we're doing computer science. And so again, they've started design process in grade 4. So here now we're saying, we need to use that design process to create, there it is, computational artifacts. So even though we're talking about humans or machines, they are in grade 5 finally explicitly expected to create something that is considered a computational artifact. And we're also seeing that block-based coding come up specifically here. So if your students have not been introduced to a block-based program, block-based coding program like Scratch previously, grade 5 teachers, you are on deck, because this is where it comes up specifically in the curriculum. And then, as I mentioned, there are two understandings in grade 5. And this I've already talked about a lot. It's actually a whole understanding for your grade 5 students that they need to sometimes go back to the drawing board and edit and revise and edit and edit and revise and revise and edit. Something complicated for them to understand, but I think one of the most valuable understandings throughout all of the new curriculum. If we can get students to realize that we can make things better by going back and fixing, that would be a great thing. And then we're talking about designing an artifact again to meet a need, since they're being asked on the previous slide about creating computational artifacts. These things are going to go together. And then this is just that reiteration piece again too. So all of the skills and procedures in grade 5 really focus in on try something out, go back to it, do it again. Coding projects in Scratch or some other free websites I will show, and some paid ones too. Like I think I saw someone mention Tinker earlier. Any of those block-based sites that kids are going to, they're going to be working through this grade 5 curriculum, preparing them for grade 6, where we do have two understandings in grade 6, but with far more or far less cusps, I would say. So this is the computer coding one. Now in grade 6, they throw that abstraction piece in there, which I don't want grade 6 teachers to get intimidated about that. You saw me explain how simply what abstraction really is. So I think it's really just understanding that it's getting rid of all the unnecessary details and focusing in on whether it's more general attributes or steps of something, or they're just what we need. That's abstraction. I don't have assessment resources for that one yet. I'm a little bit interested to see where they go with maybe Pat questions on that, because I think abstraction is a really somewhat intangible thing and might depend really on the person. As long as students are understanding what it means, right? So what is, can you abstract this? Let's get rid of the extra nonsense and just using that language with them. Any chance that we're breaking problems down. So again, we're figuring out how to do something in math, how can we abstract this? Like it's a big word problem. What parts in this problem won't apply to how to solve it? Oh, well, it doesn't matter this piece. It doesn't matter this piece. So we can apply abstraction to other areas. And as long as you're referring to it, um, and then encouraging students to use it when they're creating projects or whatever with a design process, and we should be hitting that. Identifying examples. So this is where I have some more specific things in some of the other grade level specific resources. It's definitely on my list. Um, if I get to keep continuing resources with creating resources this year, abstraction would be one of the focus points for sure to find some more things. Oh yeah, that's someone says when kids want to add extra decoration to projects, is it abstraction? That would be a great place to bring it up. And is the purpose of the project what it looks like? What's the purpose here? Okay, so then does what it looks like matter? Maybe it does. Maybe it's to be presented to other people and design matters. But maybe if it's got a functional purpose, then we don't need to worry about what it looks like. That's absolutely breaking it down to its simple thing, abstracting out the extra stuff. And then this gets into the role and design of coding in society, which I think is interesting and probably actually belongs more in the next grade 6 understanding, because that one, it's a big one. Very curious to see how that is assessed at the PAT level. And then there's the visual block-based language here again. So we've asked students already to be using some block-based coding in grade 5. After this year, hopefully your students will come in already comfortable with an online block-based coding platform. I think I would encourage you as grade 4, 5, and 6 teachers at a specific school working together to have conversations about this. It would be great to come into agreement about which program or software you're going to use so that your students are not having to learn a new program when they come into a new grade. But though maybe you decide you're doing one in grade 4, one in grade 5, and something different in grade 6 as well. So that would be good. Oh boy, 11 minutes. Here's the grade 6, the other understanding. I'm going to be totally honest that this would be the one part of the computer science curriculum that I've probably spent the least time preparing things on or even focusing on. It just seems like the darker side of computer science to me, albeit very important. So this would be those digital citizenship conversations, I think, particularly with the advent of AI and divisions making policies around the use of it, and students are using it to help them with their work, so to speak. This outcome, I think there's lots of opportunities to cover with that sort of um, digital citizenship lens as well. So I've seen the question about I will answer the question about the progression. Um, I'm a big Scratch fan, so I would encourage having grade 4s, 5s, and 6s use Scratch. There's lots to do. It does way more, especially than your kids think it does. You can build like a Mario platform jumper in Scratch yourself. So I would lean towards that. But I would definitely also recommend introducing some other things, which is a great segue into the actual programs that I'm going to recommend. So we've talked about all of the what a lot. How? I know that's what you're wondering. How do I do this with my students? What are these things that you keep talking about? So there are things to pay for sure, but I'm gonna share, I think, those first, and then talk about some free things. I have been harping about connecting into your other subjects, your other science topics. If you have a chance to bring up a computer science word and say, hey, what's our algorithm for writing a cinquain poem? You are just going to help your students get that deeper level understanding of those computer science outcomes. So without further ado, oh, I lied. This is my last. So the curriculum planning and assessment resources. These link, I don't have my little link icon here, but these are live linked. Um, did have an opportunity last year to create a document for grades 4, 5, and 6 computer science. So if you head over to the ARPDC site, they're there. They're also linked right here for you. They do actually need some updates. So there are some links on the grade 4 one that are leading out to the grade 3 computer science that need to be updated on the site. But beyond that, they're fairly up to date. They are in progress. So you'll see there's a whole column for assessment that has not been done yet. We're waiting on um, some direction on where the committee work is going this year as well. So those are there. There's links to some of the things I'm going to show you here and then other things. And it goes through specifically by understanding how you can incorporate some of these things into your classroom. If you don't already know about the ATA library and their loaning of STEM equipment, they have so much STEM equipment in the library, they actually have to list it out alphabetically in these categories. I highly suggest especially before you purchase something for your class, that you head on over to the ATA library site, make sure you're logged in with your ATA account, and borrow things from there. I know some people on the inside of this, and this stuff is not being used. Now, I think it's being used more because we've really been trying to share it out with the consortia sessions. Um, Anytime I talk about computer science, I let teachers know that this is there because I think those resources should be getting used. So you borrow them, they come out to you, they ship them to you free of cost. They'll come right to your school. You get to keep them for a month, and then you just send them back. And it's a great way to try out some things for free and see if you like them and if they're valuable or worth using with your class. If you have some funds available, because I know that there is some money that comes along with a new curriculum and depending on how your division is spending it. So if you do have funding available for some science equipment, I really recommend microbits. I stand by these as the best bang for your buck for elementary grade 4 all the way through grade 6. In fact, up through junior high, I've used microbits. There's lots of components to add on, so you can really build upon them. So if you are thinking of some kind of technology, I would check out microbits. They're going to run you about $25 to $30 a piece. The program is can be run on Chromebooks, and which is actually one of the free programs that I'm going to recommend to you as well. So that's my top choice. Love all the stuff the ATA has too. There's so many robotics out there. If you're looking for some things, like I said, I would just test some things out with your students and see if you enjoy them before you go to that level of spending some money. If you do have a little bit of money, microbits are a perfect bet. So here are my top choices for free coding resources. I would think if you've done any coding with your students at all, it maybe was through the code.org site. So code.org is a great place to start, especially if you are a beginner as a teacher teaching computer science. They have a full curriculum laid out there. They have a pre-reader level, so they can start before they can even read um, on code.org and work their way up through curriculum levels. So it's a great place. That's where the hour of code comes from. So you can go there to find just some standalone 1 hour activities that your students can do. Some of the activities are happening right on the code.org platform. Some of them actually have them using Scratch or some of the other third-party coding websites as well. So Scratch is my favorite. I have a ton of resources that I've created for Scratch. This is what I do coding in our division with. And I think probably because I got experience with it and used it, I really started to like it. Microsoft Make Code, that is the coding software that goes with the microbits, but they also have just on the Chromebook coding, so kids can build games um, and and other projects on the Microsoft Make Code site as well. I should just preface and say, depending on the settings in your division, these things may or may not be available for your students. If you're wanting to use something like Scratch with your students that is blocked, you can reach out to me and I can give you some advice for how you may be able to approach your IT people to having it open. So we do allow Scratch for students in Wetaskiwin Regional, but we've blocked some of the public library features out specifically by URL, just to try and keep kids honed in on on what they're supposed to be doing there. And then actually the Microsoft one is not open in our division because our students don't use Microsoft accounts, but they can go in and play without saving their work. Google CS First has some really great lessons that are going to connect into other things for you. So there's like language arts writing projects that have students using computer science skills. Highly recommend checking those out. And I think I've actually got the next one. I'm going to just jump ahead. Blockly Games this is a good place if you've never done anything with coding yourself and you want to just learn a little bit about, head on over to Blockly Games and play through the games that are there. This is just a basic introduction to block-based coding through a number of games. It's free. You can just jump on and play. You can come back to it and play it again later. So that's something that I recommend to our teachers as a fast finisher activity. So if you have in your Google Classroom a certain number of sites that students are allowed to visit when they're finished their work, definitely add this one to that because they'll be playing some cool games and also learning coding skills. I talked about the code.org earlier, but here's just a glance of some of their curriculum catalog. These are all little individual lessons. You can send your students there and let them pick, but you could also grab these, share them out through Google Classroom, or if you use different LMS, and send your students to specific lessons as well. All of these would have areas where you can sign up and have like a teacher administrator account and invite your students. Also not necessary. You can just give your kids the link to any of those activities or lessons, and they'll be able to just click it and go. I talked a little bit about CS First. This is a bit of a blurry um, screenshot of what they have. These ones over here on the right are what they have for lessons. So they don't have a ton of lessons there, but they are sort of generally longer based projects. And like I said, connected into doing like some type of a language arts or a creative type project. Microsoft, this is their that free coding website, the microbit ones in the middle, but they also have the arcade where students can build their own games similar to Scratch. And then there's also some hacking Minecraft coding in there. So they can actually build mods for Minecraft. And then all of these have tutorials and lessons. So you don't need to know how to do this stuff. You just need to know how to get your students to find the tutorials and lessons on the websites. You'll need to encourage them to use them. A lot of kids think they already know how to do all of this stuff, but I find in my experience with students that um, they don't, they're just skimming the surface when they go in and play with a site like Scratch. So I'm really forcing them to work through some of the tutorials on any of these sites is a great way to make sure that they're going to reach that ability to create a computational artifact with block-based coding. Last, but I hope not least, I'll have a better link. I'm just going to jump ahead. So I mentioned that Scratch is a passion of mine. I've got a website set up that's very slow loading. Do not click on this link right now or you may lose your Zoom meet. Um, I need to edit it. I've got a little bit too much going on. So there's a lot of moving GIFs on this. But this is where all my Scratch activities are. So in the grade 4, 5, and 6 CPAR documents, I've explicitly laid out some that are for your grade. So on my website, I have taken a bunch of the scratch cards that used to exist, some of the newer scratch cards. I've created a few of my own games and then just others that I found across the web. And for each one that I have had a chance to post, there's the Google slide deck that has each of the steps for the students. Like it actually lays out block by block which blocks need to be put in to build that program. I I always try to get kids to do things prior to maybe getting those instructions or have them do some exploratory learning. But the Google Slides are really scaffolded to take the students step by step through completing each project. Catch Game is one that was a scratch, but as I said, I have some that are for your grades as well. So right now I have a plant life cycle, a recycling game, and a hazards game there. So as I say, the slides are there. The links are in the slides, but if you are on Scratch and you find my user gallery, which I thought I had this in here somewhere, but I maybe gleaned over that slide really quick. My user gallery is Plangel, which is actually a really strange username because they won't let you use any of your real name. I'm going to type what it's spelled like in the chat. But anything that I've created on Scratch, I have created that project and put it in a public library. So these projects are created so that students could actually just make a copy of the project. And I've made, like, so for example, the states of water model for grade 5. If you copy my sample project, the little water molecules are there. So the students just wouldn't have to create that. Um, and then on my site too, there's like a general thing about Scratch with just sort of a general overview. If you can use those with students to show them how to use the different parts of the Scratch editor. Um, this is what I've listed out for now, what I have specific to your other science topics. But that's, like I said, a little passion project of mine on the side. So I would check back on that site. Um, at least a couple of times a year. Right now, with the extra work I'm doing, I'm not sure how much updating I'll be doing, but my goal is to keep building that because I really like building Scratch projects.